Meet Codename Goose, your on-machine open-source AI agent, built to automate your tasks. Codename Goose is an intelligent and autonomous agent capable of handling complex tasks thanks to its core features. Connect with apps and tools you already use with extensions. Built on the Model Context Protocol, you can connect to extensions like GitHub, integrate JetBrains IDEs, access Google Drive, or build your own custom integrations for Goose. For a curated list of extensions, visit our docs. With a wide range of compatible large language model providers, you can choose and integrate your preferred model. You can also run Goose as a desktop app or through the command line interface using the same configurations across both. You can think of Goose as an assistant, ready to take your instructions and do the work for you. Able to handle a wide range of tasks across various engineering domains. Here are examples of tasks Goose has helped people with already. Goose has helped dive into a new project in an unfamiliar coding language, conduct code migrations such as Ember to React or Ruby to Kotlin, increase code coverage, and even generate unit tests for a feature, and much more. To get started using Goose right away, check out our quick start and be the first to know about upcoming features by joining our community.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wild Goose Chase, where we highlight things going on in our Goose community, how we use Goose, and some fun experiments with technology and so on. We're always here to spark some innovation, some fun discussion, and push the limits using Goose. My name's Ian. I'm a senior developer relations engineer at Block. And yeah, I just want to say hi to everybody joining in chat. Let us know where you're from. Got a bunch of folks hanging out already. We got Max, we got Best Codes, Tanya's hanging out with us. So welcome to everybody in chat. Let us know where you're coming from. And if you're watching this after the live stream, say hi in the comments for us too. So today we've got a fun little retro thing that I want to show. So let me bring our guest up on the stage here. This is Andrew. So everybody, this is Andrew Shaw. He is a hardware quality program manager. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about your background and like what you do in your current role.
Yeah, sure. So I have like no programming background whatsoever. The bulk of my career has been spent in hardware. I started at Apple and I was at Apple for like 12 years, and now I've been at Block for about 3.
Okay.
And I currently support our quality programs. So that's things like my big focus right now is T3 and just monitoring how it's doing in the field right now.
Okay. And tell us what is a E3 for those that are watching the stream that don't know.
Yeah, of course. So Block Square, they have a new payment processing device. It's a little handheld thing that kind of looks like a phone, and it makes it real easy for Square sellers to just go and process payments and do all manner of things that we used to have kind of bulkier devices handle. So just a new product, pretty cool, and yeah, just watching how it's doing out in the field.
Awesome. I think I've got the V2 one with the little printer with the paper inside. And yeah, that one is pretty bulky. The new one's about the thickness of like 2 cell phones stacked.
Yep.
And it'll do a lot of the same payment processing, just no paper receipt on it, but does the tap and the swipe, or tap and chip insert and stuff like that. So yep, good deal, good deal. Max is saying in chat, we need to have Goose on the E3. And so that would be kind of interesting. Could we get AI on the payment terminal for some use case? That would be kind of interesting for sure.
That would be very
Um,
cool. Just got to figure out a way to put a bunch of RAM on it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I mean, they're mostly internet connected, so you could still talk to a remote LLM. But anyway, so I'm a huge retro nerd. I grew up in the I grew up in the 1900s. We'll say, but I grew up in like the 1970s, 1980s. So a lot of like old retro graphics, with the green display, kind of font. And so I saw this project that Andrew made. And I'm like, I got to share this with the community. This looks so cool. So Andrew, why don't you let's share your screen here, and let's talk a little bit about what you built and kind of this retro vibe, and like how you sort of got the idea for what you came up with here, and then how you got Goose to help build this.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of preface this by saying that it's a little unpolished right now because
Mhm.
I was doing some debugging on it, and it's a little clunky, so it's not going to look perfect. But I can kind of touch on that and also what we just see once it starts running. So let me get this started. So as you can see, a little clunky. Um, I'm still working on how some of the animations load in, but I
Okay.
could speak to what we've got here. And then, Ian, if it's all right with you too, I can show the screenshot that I posted
Yeah, totally
in
fine.
the Goose channel too, just to kind of give a better overview of what we have. But I'll just speak to what we have. As you saw, there was a boot up sequence that was supposed to pop in, similar to what you would see like I don't know how many people here will remember, but like old MS-DOS and,
Oh yeah.
like Commodore 64s and things like that. And so I wanted to keep that kind of, what is it called? Power on self-test sort of
Hmm.
dialogue that showed up. Of course, this thing can actually load in a lot faster than that, but I
For
thought it
sure.
would be fun to just have a little bit of delay there.
Slow it
Um,
down a little bit. Yeah, make it look retro, right? I
mhm,
mean, it took, I mean, my,
exactly.
my, my very first sort of, I mean, this is before the internet like really took off, but like I had a modem that was so slow that literally you would load a page of text and you would literally watch, the text draw on the screen. It was like 300 bits a second. Now I'm at like a billion bits a second, actually 2 billion here at home. But back in the day, it was 300, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see the delay of like how this animates out on the screen. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny to think about just how slow that stuff used to be and how fast it is now.
right.
And that I had to
Yeah.
like build in uh artificial limiters to change the speed.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, so let's see, what can I talk about now? Kind of maybe should I talk about like what inspired me to make this?
Well, let's
Would it also
yeah, let's
help
talk.
bring up
Let's talk about
Mhm.
the inspiration, and then talk to us about these weekly metrics, and then maybe we'll pull up that screenshot of like how the daily thing kind of rolls up into what you're showing here for a weekly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how many people on the stream have watched the Alien or Aliens movies, but that was a big inspiration for me. I've always loved how the computer interface looked in those movies. And so my goal was to build something that looked kind of similar to that. And in previous iterations, I kind of had like a lot of little alien Easter eggs, like calling it the like Nostromo system analyzer, like stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so yeah, that played a big part in inspiring it. And then oh well, I'd be remiss to say what also inspired me was goose perception.
Hmm.
So
For
that
sure.
actually is what got me started. And so I see Max is very active in the screen.
Yeah,
um,
Max
so
says he wants this to be part of perception. So
yeah, yeah, and Max, I'd be very happy to talk to you about that at some point.
sweet.
But I'll be perfectly honest. Like, I set up Goose Perception, and I was like, "This is so cool." Oh, I have no programming background. I have no idea what's happening here, and so
Hmm.
I loved the granularity it was able to offer, but I had no idea how it worked. But I took that as inspiration to build this, and I was like, "Okay, well, I know this is possible." how can I build something like this myself and maybe turn it into something that's like a bit more of a dashboard? And so that's
Gotcha.
kind of like where we're at today. Um, why don't I talk about the weekly metrics, and then we
Sure.
can pull up the previous version I had of this. So the weekly metrics themselves, really all this is looking at is it's looking at my week, and it's looking at the actual like time that I had logged for the week. And so what we have here is just each day I have it record when I start my day, and it keeps track of that, and then it keeps track of when I end my day. And
Okay.
so uh I didn't I worked more than 3 hours on Monday, but like let's just let's just
Well, you
overlook
made it.
that part entirely.
You made up for it on Wednesday and Thursday. That's how I would look at
Yeah,
that as a
exactly.
previous manager. It's like it balances out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We'll go with that story. So, but you get the general idea is that it's looking at the start time of my day, and it's looking at the stop time of my day, and it's just providing metrics based on that.
Okay.
There's a little bit of kind of like interesting backend logic I built into this too, where what it's doing is to establish the actual like start of my day. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of like I just put my computer to sleep at night. And so,
Mhm.
sometimes stuff is still running. And so
Right.
what might happen is on the back end, it might look at that app usage as some kind of activity and misinterpret that as
Yeah.
actually me doing something. And
Mhm.
so I built a couple of systems in to basically monitor how that activity, like when that activity starts. And so what it looks for is kind of like more human interaction,
Okay.
and also that it all occurs like within, is it's not looking at data from like midnight, for example.
Right.
And that's how it's
So for
coming up with
human,
these
so
numbers.
for human interaction, for example, you're looking for like mouse clicks or keyboard typing, things like that.
Exactly right.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
but with all that said,
Let's
yeah, let's bring up this.
Yeah, so here's the screenshot. Unfortunately, I can't really zoom in on this. Um, let's figure out. Let's see. How can we? No, can't. That won't make it any bigger. I think that's as big as we can actually make it on the screen. Unfortunately. Um, let's see. Do you have a way to sort of bring it up on your side where you can zoom in on it a little bit?
Yeah, let me try that. I downloaded the screenshot. One moment.
So I'll talk a little bit. So while Andrew's bringing that up, I can see this on my side. So let me talk a little bit about what he's got in the screenshot here. So at the very top, he's got like the date time and the session start, and then the second block is system metrics, which is some logging. The uptime, the downtime, and so on, and then a whole chunk in the middle, which I'm really interested about, and some other folks in chat are also like, how do you track all this stuff? And it's like, how much time are you using Goose? How much time are you in your browser? How much are you, spending in Chrome? How much are you on Slack in DMs versus thread activity? And then development time, how long are you spending in your terminal? And then how much time is like system utilities? And then the block down at the very bottom is kind of like lifetime logged activity, weekly averages, best day this week, productivity trends, peak hours. Like you're totally scoring like your focus time on here as well, your amount of work progress. Not sure if that red bar on your work progress was a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, if you have a way to let's see, let's bring this one up instead.
Yeah, so okay, perfect. Yeah, so I can
Oh,
just
yeah,
zoom
there we go.
around
Now we
this.
can zoom in.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just kind of talk about what I've got here. So yeah, this still exists within the back end of my like the current iteration of the retro dashboard that I built. And so yeah, let's just kind of like talk through it. So I have like something up here at the top. You see this last update, and this actually directly translates to the last log that was recorded. And
Okay.
so it's just showing basically like, oh, okay, it's 4:52, and okay, I'm looking at the time right now and it's 4:52. So great. We're up to date on our metrics. Additionally, I have the system status that was showing online, and this is just a like live feedback loop of a watchdog script that Goose helped me develop. And so
Okay.
basically, for those unfamiliar with how watchdog scripts work, it's just monitoring that everything that actually generates this dashboard is working correctly. And so if something were to like go down or crash, this online status would have transitioned into an error and it would have told me
Okay.
what was not working. Um, and so, yeah, just moving right along, like I have this today log section, and that's just a count of how many logs are recorded today. We have uptime, which is, showing 10 hours in this example, downtime, which uh, for all intents and purposes is supposed to be like idle time,
Okay.
or just like time that is, inactive. And I think for simplicity's sake, it was just looking at like idle time on the computer or when the computer was
Mhm.
asleep.
Okay.
In that, um, I believe played into the focus score, which the focus score I think also came from Goose perception and how it was calculated. But I also think the focus score is calculated on is like how many times you are like switching between applications or like focus areas.
Okay.
And so if you're doing that rapidly, you don't have a lot of focus. If you're staying within one session or one application, your focus score increases.
Hmm.
And then
Okay.
lastly, I think this work progress just shows as red, to indicate that I've worked over 8 hours.
Okay.
Yep. But I understand there's a lot of interest in how this application activity works. So yeah, what can I expand on there?
Let's see. So some folks were wondering a little bit like how this got gathered, or like how it's actually gathering some of the stats of like how is it watching how long you're in Slack or how long you're in the browser. I know some of that's being collected by perception.
Mhm.
And I posted a link in chat as well. If you're curious about perception, I linked to the live stream that I did with Max a couple of weeks ago where we dove in on perception, like how it works. But how, like, do you know how those stats from perception are being captured in order to show in this kind of format?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things that are happening here. I have two backend monitors that are working. One is just called monitor, and it is just looking at general app usage. And so, like,
Okay.
just whatever's in the foreground. Um, it's pretty simple and it's pretty dumb. It's, for all intents and purposes, it acts the same way as an application monitor would.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
to get more granular, I employed a screenshot analyzer, and like I know from like a security perspective, that's like a terrible sort of thing. But I just as
We
my own
we
personal
we won't mention the operating system coming out of Redmond, Washington, that was like trying to do that on the regular for its users, and they kind of like waffle back and forth on should we capture screenshots of everything the user does for AI purposes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, yeah. It's I won't be shy about it. It's incredibly invasive, huge privacy
right,
concerns, but it's all stored on my computer.
right,
But what it's doing is, so every 30 seconds, the computer is taking a screenshot and then running it through something called QCR.
okay,
And what that's doing is oops, that's pulling context out of whatever's in the screenshot. And so what it's doing is it's taking that context and comparing it against the app usage, and it's saying, okay, well, what application is frontmost, or what is in the foreground? And then it's saying, okay, well, now I understand that that application is in the foreground. Now I'll use the screenshot analyzer to determine what's actually being worked on.
hmm,
And
okay,
so, um, what that does is those two monitors feed into a SQLite database, which is where all of this is being recorded. And it's just a big table with all of these metrics. Um, I've had to do a quick bit of like massaging to get this to display like not too detailed, but not undetailed. Like, it's taken a little bit of work just kind of like getting it in a place that I'm happy with. But
Mhm.
um as you can see here, like it's doing a pretty good job of breaking it down. And yeah, that's just kind of how it works and how it works on the back end.
So let's talk a little bit about how you prompted Goose to even come up with this idea. Like, how did you have to sort of, because you mentioned like you don't have a development background. So how did you kind of like? I mean, this would be the quintessential like vibe coding session of, hey
Mhm.
Goose, I want to build this kind of tracker. I want it to be kind of like retro terminal vibe, but like how did you sort of give Goose the context of what to build and how to build and like talk a little bit about the history of like how you had to keep going back to Goose to refine the idea and like work with the database and stuff like that.
Sure. So like I kind of said before, it all sort of stemmed from Goose perception and just like when I was getting that set up on my computer, I was like, how does this thing even work? And so I started digging into how it worked, and I was like, oh, I'm sort of seeing like on the back end how it's like pulling everything together. And so um I didn't understand how any of the code worked, but I understood the general idea of how it was collecting data. And so that's
Okay.
kind of how I started with this. I had a vision for how I wanted it to work. And so I started with saying, you know, Goose, I want to build an application that's like a work analytics dashboard. I want it to have this kind of retro look. And let's just start with making that look. And so it did that. And then I was like, okay, let's define how we're going to set up our monitors. And I was like, this is how I'd like to do it. Just laid it out and it helped me set something up. Um,
Okay.
as I said, I have no background in this stuff. So I was just like, you know what? If it works, that's awesome. If it doesn't work, that's okay too. Um, I'm
Mhm.
just I'm just vibe coding.
Right. So and then so on the screen here we see it's got like today logs and lifetime logs. Are those logs coming from perception or is that from the monitor script that you wrote that's seeing what's going on and logging it either in your SQLite database or files or something to kind of capture that data?
So perception was really just the inspiration for this. It doesn't utilize any of the systems that perception had whatsoever. So the monitors and the screenshot analyzer were built from the ground up by me.
Mm,
Well, I
okay.
shouldn't say me, Goose.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, this is why we love using Goose, right? Is because we can just throw like abstract ideas and see what it sort of comes up with, and then we can go in and we can refine the idea and go, hey, make it this color, like go retro terminal, green font, kind of look, and it'll just figure out what to do. Like I love how it's even drawing like the ASCII boxes and stuff around everything. Um, Max
That was
brings
a
up
huge pain to get working correctly. You'd be
yeah, for sure.
surprised.
I mean, I did old school programming in a library called N curses that would draw boxes around things. And it was a huge hassle for sure. Max wants to know, is it sending this to your manager?
So I did show my manager this, and he's been very interested in it.
I think
um,
our
I'll leave it
team
at that.
I think our team would be very interested in having us run this stuff too. Yeah, that was very cool. Um, so so Goose helped you write the monitor, and then it helped you write kind of this front end as well. So how many different components is this, and like how long did you spend with Goose, and like how many iterations, kind of going back and refining the idea? Like how long did this take to build?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I would say I'm still working on it very much.
Mhm.
It's taken quite a bit of time. I mean, one thing that I will say, or I guess I'll say, I started working on this sort of like a couple days after I learned about perception. So maybe like back in, like around third week of July. Um, and I just have been using it just in the background while I do like my other work. This was really just kind of like a fun background project I wanted to just see if I could put together. And so like I'll be doing other stuff like using Goose to check SQL queries and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, oh, let's work on this thing in the background and let's just see what you come up with.
Yep. So Max is like, so it took you a week. Like this whole thing took like a week to kind of like vibe code and like even just as like a side project, not like a dedicated week, but just, oh, I'm already in here dealing with SQL. Let's get Goose to think about the SQL for this other thing too. So in a week, you were able to kind of use all the perception stuff and like track all the stuff and come up with this whole like UI. So I mean, that's pretty great. So I forget if I asked this question at the start or if we just talked about it kind of backstage, but like, why a terminal UI versus like HTML? Like, bring it up in a little web browser that like constantly refreshes or something like that. Like, why terminal? Why, old ASCII graphics and things like that?
I honestly don't have a better answer than I just like the aesthetics.
Fair.
And I will say too, like I am I'm a little more comfortable kind of like getting around this Python code than I would be like with HTML or JavaScript. And so
Mhm.
I was just like, I'll just keep it simple here, like just run it in terminal. And that was kind of how I started thinking about it at the beginning too, because I originally I wanted this to be in block cell
Okay.
and have it be just its own kind of web thing. And I was like, oh, I don't really like how this looks, and I don't really like how it's working. And I was like, you know what, let's just try to break it down into something else and see if I can just run it in terminal. And that's where I landed
Right.
today.
So for those watching the stream, Blockcell is just like an internal way that we can sort of launch little web apps within the company only, not like publicly. So just for the terminology's sake there. I mean, honestly, if I were to do this in HTML, now you've got me thinking like I would do an HTML version, but tell Goose, like make it look like a retro terminal, with like, Courier font and things like that. So it would still look exactly like you've got here, but still do it in HTML. But I mean, you're a guy after my own heart writing this stuff in Python. So I'm like, oh, Python, Python's the way to go
Yeah.
for stuff like this.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
now Max is hitting us up. He wants themes for this. So he doesn't just want this. He wants like themed versions of this. I think that's a great idea.
yeah, well, so maybe that's a good segue into just kind of like, what do I have in mind for the future of this?
Yeah. What's your roadmap for this?
Yeah, so well, one, my demo needs a little bit more massaging. So that's still being worked on and getting improved. A couple things that I've had in mind is like one, Max, I've certainly been thinking about themes. I want to do uh what is it? I don't remember which computer, but there was an old computer, it might have been the Commodore that had like an amber colored terminal interface. And so I want to have that kind of theme. I want to use this just what is it called? This phosphor green theme that we've got
Mhm.
here. But maybe like come up with some other things as well. The other part of this is like I would like to get this on GitHub at some point once it's in a good spot so other people can look at it, work on it, make the
Mhm.
changes that they'd like to make to it, things like that.
Yep.
I'm also like, now that we've kind of been talking about it, thinking about like going back and making it an HTML thing because I believe that I could do kind of more visual things with it.
Mhm.
In my sort of research into this, I did find somebody who built like their own kind of terminal interface, but it was really just like almost like a skin for terminal.
Oh,
And
cool.
but it created like fake CRT effect and scan lines and like text glow. And it looks so cool. And I was like, oh, this is like very beyond me.
Right.
But
Right.
I was like thinking about looking at that to see, how else I might be able to really like just double down on that retro vibe.
Yeah, for sure. Best Codes is also looking for some gradient themes. I mean, a lot of that stuff, like gradients would be way easier in HTML with CSS for sure.
Mhm.
Animations you could do with JavaScript or CSS, but again, like get Goose to write you that code because I'm horrible at CSS. I'm like the Peter Griffin, with the window blind. If you've seen that image of like here's a backend developer playing with CSS, that's totally me. My motto in life has always been like I'll work on the back end, so I'll make it work, someone else make it pretty, and we'll work together on this thing. But like I'm very much a stick figure drawing kind of design person. But yeah, gradient themes would be fun. I mean, I think you could probably go either way. I still think some people would really go for the like actually run this in the terminal and having that artificial delay with the animations and stuff like that. I think getting some of the like screen captures of the animated sort of boot up sort of look, I think would appeal to a lot of retro folks. I think Max is pointing out here that the terminal with the amber was DEC. I want to say one of the first Amiga computers, which was also Commodore, I think also had an amber display, and Commodore 64 is making a comeback. They got a new version of the Commodore 64 coming out this year, and
I
I'm
saw
not gonna
that.
lie, I'm really really tempted to get one because that was my first computer back in 1982. My dad came home with a Commodore 64, and that's how I got into coding. So learning to hack games basically is like I'm horrible at playing video games, and so it's like, what can I do to like hack my video game and make it easier to play? And that's what got me into coding. So yeah, I think you could take this in a lot of directions. Get it up on GitHub for sure. I think people would be really keen to kind of dive in on this. The main question there is, would they have to use perception in order to get the stats for this, or would there, I mean, we could almost come up with like a plugin kind of thing where you could scrape stats out of something through a plugin or MCP or something like that to like populate this as well. Could have all kinds of fun with this, I think.
Yeah. That is all certainly back end stuff that I am not at all familiar with, but I am open to suggestions.
Yeah. Well, get it up on GitHub, and we'll start pouring in some code contribution, I think, on this. So.
Awesome.
Jamal is saying in chat, I would definitely have this running in my terminal with some cool skins. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, me personally, like I said, I grew up on this kind of vibe. So having something like this just running in my terminal would be really fun. It would also be really frightening, I think, just to see my stats of like how long I'm like, for me, it's more the context switch. And I think that's one of the things you've actually got here on the, or I thought I saw on here. Oh yeah, down at the bottom, the average context switch, 18 per hour. So like switching back and forth, 18 times an hour on things. Mine would probably be a little bit higher than that, but yeah, like even seeing like the top app and like the peak hours and things like that is really kind of fascinating. Like how you could go in and maybe have it kind of learn over time. Like, when do I usually start my day? When do I usually end my day? So you don't have to strictly tell it like only watch between 9 and 5 or something like that. Like it could kind of learn some of that over time, or have Goose kind of like, hey, go update my stats based on my average, like when I start using my system and when I stop using my system. Maybe tie in with the perception. If you do the full perception where it's got the camera on, like maybe only track stats when you actually see me in front of the computer. Again, I posted the link for the perception video that I did with Max, or the live stream that we did a couple of weeks ago, where it can actually like watch facial expressions and things like that. That would be interesting to see, like how often do I look frustrated, or how often do I look like really excited about like what I'm working on. Like those would all be pretty interesting things to pull up in here too. Max is also saying, "Hear me out. We need Lumen theme."
Yes.
I'm not sure what Lumon is. What's
That's
Lumon?
from
What's that one?
Severance.
Oh, okay. I've never watched Severance. That's like the one show I haven't gotten into binge watch yet. So
That's another great kind of terminal-ish interface that would
okay.
be very cool. We can do a blue thing. Yeah, menacing encouragements.
Menacing encouragement. Yeah. Well, we have seen Goose come up with some pretty best causes. I don't want to know how often I'm frustrated. We have seen Goose come up with some pretty interesting, like when we're vibe coding things at events, and we say like, hey, make a goal tracker, but make a demotivational, goal tracker. And so every time you do something, it's like, oh, look at you pretending to, accomplish things. Like it gets pretty insulting pretty quickly. So I think Goose would do a pretty good job at coming up with the sarcastic encouragements for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When I had first started playing around with Goose Perception, I saw that I could vibe code different like attitudes into it. And so I was like playing around
Right.
with like, I don't know how many people here have played like Portal, but I was like a GLaDOS theme or something like that.
Sweet.
And so I love the idea of like a very sarcastic and demotivating like AI tool.
Right. Or for those who were into like the old the Hitchhiker of the
Oh,
Galaxy series, was it the Melvin robot? Was Melvin the name? Where it was
Marvin,
like
I
this
think.
Marvin. I was
Is super
close, yeah.
depressed.
Super depressed mood all the time, and yeah,
Mhm.
very much a C3PO kind of vibe of like always, always thinking of the downside, like glass half empty kind of attitude for sure. Tanya sharing a comment from Discord. I had a network issue. Definitely love to hear how you measured work progress. So talk to us a little bit, and some of this might be coming from perception, but when you're tracking like the work progress bar, which is all red in your screenshot here, like what is that actually indicating? And was this like at the start of the month where it still saw all your tasks and none of them were completed in GitHub yet? Or like, what is that actually tracking here?
So in the iteration shown here, it was actually like pretty simple. It was looking at my uptime and comparing it to a normal 8-hour day. And so it's red because I've gone beyond that 8-hour day. So
Oh, okay.
how this would look at like the start of your day, for example, is it would show empty because there would be no time logged for the day. And then it's
Gotcha.
just it's almost like a timer. But what it's doing is it's comparing that uptime to your 8-hour day, and it's just filling in based on that. And so
Gotcha.
let's say you're 4 hours into your day, it would be half filled. If you're 10 hours into your day like we have here, it's completely full and red, showing that you're maybe working too much.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty cool. We had one other comment from Jamal. I would for sure add an animated style theme or skin, might actually add some lo-fi music in the background. That'd be kind of fun too. Again, with the HTML version, you could totally add, just play some stuff in the background. Terminal, you could probably do it too. Like if you're into Python, like if you're building this out in Python, you could use Pygame. And Pygame, you can actually have it play audio in the background while other process threads are running and stuff like that. So we could probably tell Goose to like, hey, implement Pygame so we can play some background audio or, little sounds. Like if that work progress bar fills up and, maybe start beeping at us like, hey, maybe take a break or something like that. Could be kind of interesting too.
Yeah, I love the idea of building sounds into it because well, going back to what inspired this too, like the computers in the Alien movies have a very specific kind of like sound effects tied to it. And I always thought it was so cool because it reminded me of, when you would boot up an old CRT computer and like the boom noise it makes
Yeah, you
when
get
it's
the beep
powering up.
and a little clicking in the background while it's like, powering up and you hear the hum of everything. Yeah, you could have some real fun with this for sure. I know.
Yeah, I miss when computers had that kind of audio feedback to them because it was actually everything was like moving inside of it.
Literally, things were warming up, and and I've actually seen some video games, over the past couple of years where they try to emulate like this retro kind of CRT screen, like that's like the old school like really thick monitors and whatever that had to warm up and whatever. It had all kinds of really neat stuff. Max is saying like he needs the clicking now. And he also wants the progress bar to break through if it's more than 12.
Yeah, it just goes beyond the border.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, good deal. Awesome. Well, this was so much fun. Like I'm a huge stats nerd myself, and so knowing that you're tracking all the stuff in a SQLite database, for me, I would want to look at, like you had the kind of the weekly breakdown of like what does my week look like, but are you thinking about doing anything more like, here's a month to month or a quarter to quarter. Like for me, I would look at long-term use of these stats. Like, am I getting more productive with my work? Am I, spending more time in my browser certain times of the week or certain times of, a year kind of thing? Like in my summer, when my kids are home from school, am I spending more time in the browser, or am I, focused and heads down more on my work, things like that. I always look for trending kind of data. So I'd be really curious to know, like, do you have other thoughts of how you might do this, or did you just want like the weekly, daily kind of tracker?
Oh no, like I'm like a big stats nerd too. Like I think that
Cool.
stuff is very interesting. And so um it's like one thing to be able to like kind of look back at your time and you're like, oh, oh, my week. Okay, well, yeah, I can kind of remember my week, but like, I was thinking long term is like it would be very cool to, be able to like look back at my year and I could say
Mm,
like, oh, there are these kinds of trends. Like maybe I'm using Goose more here and not here. And just
right.
seeing how those things fluctuate throughout the year and what's my focus or when am I working too long and oh that's tied to when I'm
Mm,
feeling burnt out and like all those
yeah.
types of
How
things.
about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so there's all kinds of like neat correlations that you could, potentially draw. And, it's one of those things, it's just like as it collects more data, you can build more patterns and understand more about like how you work or how
Right.
you're using your computer and all that manner of stuff. So there's
Right.
a ton of potential here.
I remember talking to a coworker at a previous job back when I worked at SendGrid, and shout out to Elmer if if you ever happen to watch these. But this guy that I worked with, he was into like the fitness trackers like 10, 15 years ago when fitness trackers were first coming out. And he was trying to find ways into their APIs to be able to scrape like all the stats from all the fitness trackers to be able to come up with some way of like, what's my overall lifestyle? And combine that with work and work hours, and like, am I exercising enough for the amount of hours that I'm putting in? Am I sitting too much? Do I need a standing desk or the treadmill desk or whatever? Like, he had this idea of like constantly scraping those kinds of stats, maybe for a dashboard like this. So I'd be interested too of like, oh, I wonder what other things I could pull into a dashboard around like how long I've been sitting in my chair. Like, could perception like look and realize like I'm actually sitting in my chair as opposed to being on a standing desk, and like tell me like, hey, it's time to stand up now. Or could I work something into the motor of my desk to like automatically start elevating my desk when it's time? I'm like, oh, okay, I should stand up now. And like, Goose is like raising and lowering my desk for me. Like that could be kind of trippy too. But yeah, like I said, I'm a huge stats nerd too. So like finding other ways of like bringing this stuff in, because I love learning about myself and like what can I improve about my lifestyle and things like that. I think you could get really, really into like combining all of this in some way for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Max is saying plug an MCP into the desk. We had one more question come in from Discord. Thank you. Shout out to Tanya for doing this for us. What models did you use for this? And do you have tricks for getting around context length limit? So when you're using Goose, which model do you tend to use? And did you run into context limits? And how did you work around those?
Yes. Okay. So this is an excellent question because this was a big pain point for me.
Okay.
So I'll just start by saying that I was using what is it, Sonnet,
Hmm.
which is I think Claude. Yeah,
Claude
or no,
4.
not Sonnet. I'm sorry. Yeah, Claude 4. Um, I was using that. To be perfectly honest, like it was just what seemed to be was the default for Goose, and I found that it did a really good job doing the kind of stuff that I wanted to do with it. Could I tell you how ChatGPT differs from like Anthropic? No. But
Hmm.
I was happy with, how Claude worked overall. And so
Right.
that was a model that I ended up going with. Your question about context length limit though is a very good one. So I ran into this problem quite often. In fact, when I was like plugging away at this yesterday, um, I had realized I made a critical error in some of my setup of how I was doing this vibe coding with Goose. So um, every time that I was working on the dashboard, I would just keep working on it, eventually run into a context limit. I
Mm.
started to notice that I would tell it to like once I saw that we were approaching that limit, I would say like, hey, can you summarize this and save it into a memory?
Right.
And so I would do that. And then I'd start a new session and I'd run into a context limit. I'd run into it sooner than I had previously. And
Interesting.
that just kept happening. And so what I found out is I just asked Goose, I was like, hey, why are we using so many tokens like just off like once we start working on stuff? And it was like, oh, actually, your memory is huge. And so it takes a
Right.
lot to just review everything that's there before we even start any work. And so
Yeah.
I just asked it to review what we have in our memory and break it down. And so what it ended up doing is it was like, hey, I see that you're building this work analytics thing. We've broken it down into subsections. So now when you want to return working on it, specify what part of it you want to work on, and it'll pull
Right.
just that memory. And that has had a really big impact on overcoming constantly bumping into this context length
Right.
limit.
So I had a blog post come out last month. If folks are interested, you can go check out the Goose blog, where I was talking about like Goose hints and the memory extension and how all of that data gets sent with every request, because the LLM is dumb and it's stateless. And so it needs all of that previous context in order to like really answer. And it needs to kind of know like, how did we get here? So if you're telling Goose like, hey, summarize this whole conversation and store that as a memory, then that memory is actually getting sent with every request in every panel of Goose, no matter what you're asking. You could be in a completely different Goose, and now it's going to see that memory and it's going to send that over to that other one too. And so it's not session specific memory. And it stores it long term so that it can send with every request. So I know I've asked the team like, hey, is there any way that we can pre-process the request and only send the relevant memories to the LLM? And I think that sparks some interesting discussion for them around like how we actually process memories within Goose and send them with the request. But I think that would be one way to minimize that. But generally, how we tell people to use Goose is there is that summarize the conversation, but then start a new session with that summary, as opposed to storing that as a memory, because then that memory gets sent with everything. And that's why the subsequent use was probably growing for you.
Yeah, now when I also am telling it to like save something to memory, I'm telling it to if it's like a redundant thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling it to remove that, past memory and replace it with the new memory so that it's not pulling from
Okay.
like super, super old details.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I found when I do development with Goose, that context limit really goes up if I'm saying like, hey, go run like a suite of software tests, because there's so much output in that the LLM has to go through and interpret, like, did these tests actually pass or not? And so telling Goose to run tests, I found I was constantly running out of my context window, and I'd have to go in and summarize it. But then it's really just packing up all of the test runs that had happened before and still remembering those in the new session, where it's like, okay, well, when I'm running those tests, like I don't care about that for the next session. I just want the conversation that I've had with Goose and not remember like the actual test runs. But yeah, I think we're not quite there yet as far as like telling Goose like, hey, summarize this except for this data. Like I would love to say like, hey, summarize our conversation and the context window, but minus my software test runs, so that it doesn't compact that, because it's not really needed for the new session I'm about to start, because every test run should be kind of like completely fresh. But yeah, when you're storing these things as memories in Goose, those memories are going to get sent with every request across Goose. So just be aware of that, I think, when you're working with that. But yeah, great question, Tanya. Thank you for sharing that one from Discord for us. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, we can hang out for a few more minutes. Otherwise, we'll start to kind of wind down. Again, I love this retro vibe. Like I said, I've said this a couple times. Like I grew up with this kind of thing on my screen all the time, like really dumb ASCII sort of layouts, and trying to get the spacing just right so everything's perfectly lined up is really tricky. And this old library that I used to use called N curses. Well, it was started as curses and then was N curses. You could get into like coloring things, but you could also say like, hey, put this field at this position, but right justify it. So you can like get the timings and the stats on the right side and kind of go right to left and the labels left to right. It's tricky to plan that stuff out ahead of time, but this is also where Goose shines. Like you can say like, hey, here's a screenshot of this thing that Andrew built. I want to build something like this, and it'll go through and it'll analyze, the image of that screenshot and then go do things with that. I did a thing a while back where I said, hey, Goose, here's like a picture of a menu, go populate my Square restaurant dashboard or menu, and it actually found all the cheeseburgers and the descriptions and whatever, and actually like processed enough of that text to actually go build a menu for me. So there's all kinds of really interesting things here. Just looking through chat to see if anyone else had questions. Max was leaving comments about like, can I have Goose like lower and raise my desk? It's like lower my desk. It's like, I'm afraid I can't do this, Ian. Very, very much a Hal moment from Space Odyssey. So shout out to all my other retro movie nerds out there as well. Old sci-fi movies, man, they were really great. I can't assist with this request. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, if we don't have any more questions, we'll start to wind down. Andrew, thank you so much for sharing this with us in our internal channel. As soon as I saw this, I'm like, I got to have Andrew on the live stream. Like I need to nerd out on this one for sure. So we appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I know you were like right around like meetings and stuff to join the live stream. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And shout out to your manager for letting you do this, but also, do we send this kind of stats to our managers and our team leads? It could be a slippery slope, I think, but could also be really interesting as far as like how much time, like on our team, how much time are we spending like making our videos or doing our blogs or doing live streams and things like that. Would be an interesting sort of stats breakdown for sure. But yeah, any last thoughts or any way that we can contact you if we want this up on GitHub? Where should we watch? Do you have like socials or anything like that we can watch if you post this live?
Gosh, I'm not very good with social stuff. Well, I'll start like if you're at Block, I'm the only Andrew Shaw at Block, so you can message me on there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can look me up as Andrew Shaw there too. I have like a cute picture of my wife and I and our pets as like my my LinkedIn picture. So like be on the lookout for that. And yeah, like feel free to reach out. Like I'm learning this stuff too as we go along, and so like you may have great feedback for me. And yeah, it was a real pleasure being able to do this. I appreciate you inviting me to present on this little thing that was really just like a fun passion project. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you do get it up on GitHub, we'll definitely help you promote it, and I'll be in there making some pull requests. We did have one last question. Can we talk more about perception if it's not an internal tool? So we did a live stream about it a couple of weeks ago. I'll post the link in chat here again, and you can go check this out. So this was the live stream that I did with Max a couple of weeks ago, where it was all about perception and how it works. And it had a link in there for how to go download it and try it. It is a public, it's a public project. So it is experimental though. So keep that in mind if you do download it and want to use it. But basically it watches everything you do so that Goose can kind of learn over time, like what you do on your computer. And it'll like look through GitHub and go, oh, you have this task to like write a blog. Let me help you write that blog kind of thing. So we called it Clippy Gets an Upgrade. So it's a little bit like the old Microsoft Clippy with the paperclip thing, but with AI, like actual AI intelligence behind it. But perception does so much more than that. So definitely go check out that video as well. And if you do have additional questions, just post them in Discord. This question came from Discord. So if you have more questions about it, please ask on Discord. We'll definitely help you out there for sure. Cool. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. So again, thanks to Andrew for the work that you did on this, and big thank you to everybody in chat. We had some great questions and great conversations, and Best Code says he like Clippy, but actually works, or actually useful for sure. Yeah, thanks again for building this out, Andrew. I'm looking forward to like nerding out on this too. So even if you just put it on an internal GitHub or whatever, I'd love to nerd out on this and see what you got going on. And again, thanks to everybody in chat for questions and so on from Discord and YouTube and so on. So thank you for that. And if you're watching this and you want to get started with Goose, you can check out block.github.io/Goose for more information on how to install it, how to automate things, and do some really cool stuff. Let me pull that up here as a banner so you can see that link. And so you can definitely go check out the Goose project. Actually, I'll show you this one instead. And we've also got a really vibrant Discord community as well. So please check us out on Discord, discord.gg/block-open source. We'll get you over to our Discord community. We got a lot of folks in there using Goose. You can ask us questions about how to use Goose, or if you're stuck on things, or if you just got ideas on stuff, that would be great. So please check out our Discord community. We'd love to hear anything that you're building. We've got a whole channel in Discord about like what you're doing with Goose. So definitely share your work with us there, and drop by and just say hello. So thanks again to Andrew, and we'll catch everybody in a couple of weeks, I think, for another Wild Goose Chase. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.